Our reporter Lutendo Bododi is standing by with Katlego Nyoni, who actually broke the story on Michael Komape's death. Lutendo, a very good morning to you, and to you, Katlego, thank you so much for joining us. So what's the general sentiment of residents in Limpopo in particular over the issue of pit toilets?
You know, it's so sad, you know, as we said earlier, that the pit latrines story has been one of our main or one of our flagship focal points in terms of reporting what is happening on the ground. You go out to people on the ground, you listen to parents, and what they say about these pit latrines is said, like we said earlier, most of the school infrastructure in the province was built by parents themselves, and these are poverty-stricken people who don't have much in the way of resources. They use anything that they lay their hands on. They use recycled material, they use clay to build this school infrastructure, not just toilets but also classrooms. And if you look at what was there in the province, many schools in the province, it's, as we said, a death trap. You know, in some instances you see teachers and learners sharing these pit latrines, and this is a private matter, you know, and it's sad to see that some of these pit toilets are falling off. They have cracks, they are showing infirmities, and in some areas where the areas are high rainfall areas, you see them falling. And you know, it's just fortunate that we haven't had many cases of learners dying or falling into the pits recently. But it's sad, and you know, it's an impending disaster. This is what people see now. Of course, we also want to talk to you about the court issue. You remember that advocacy group Section 27 dragged the Department of Basic Education to court. Not only the Department of Basic Education, but also the Department of Education in Limpopo. And at that particular time, the court in High Court in Limpopo ordered that the Department of Basic Education outlined a plan to permanently and utterly eradicate these pit latrines. Of course, they came up with a plan, and when they came up with that particular plan, Section 27 said again that we are not satisfied because your plan is not clear, it's vague, it doesn't show empathy, it doesn't show diligence, and the time frame is just not realistic. I mean, the department was talking about starting to eradicate these pit latrines from 2026, aiming to completely eradicate them in 2030. And Section 27 said, but we're not satisfied. And then the Department of Basic Education was then dragged back to court. As we are talking to you now, the matter is back in court. And a few weeks back, I think it was 3 weeks back, and the High Court in Polokwane reserved judgment in as far as that is concerned. But as you said, I'm with Katlego Nyoni, who broke this story a few years ago, the story of Michael Komape a few years back. He has much more than I do in terms of information, because he has been there. I was not here, I was following him, but he has much in the way of information, and he joins me now. Katlego, thank you so much again. Just talk to us about how the courts have been handling the Michael Komape issue, not just the Michael Komape issue, but also the issue of eradication of pit latrines in general.
Good morning, Lutendo. I think two landmark moments occurred, one in 2013, just before the tragic death and untimely passing of Michael Komape. Now, this was the adoption of the Norms and Standards for Public Schools Infrastructure Act, which essentially pushed the courts at a later stage to take into consideration the safety of learners at schools who are using pit latrines. Again, in 2018, we saw the introduction by the Department of Basic Education of what is known as the safe, appropriate sanitation at schools. Basically, that entailed that the department needed to come up with a plan. So following those specific landmark occasions, we saw then advocacy group pushing with the court systems. Initially, the Polokwane High Court did not grant Rosina Komape and Michael Komape, the awarding of the constitutional damages, as you pointed out, of 1.4 million rand. However, it was then challenged at the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein, where we saw then the court saying or issuing a declaratory order, or a declarator that is legally a strong worded document, simply saying that it's not that the Department of Basic Education is not aware of its responsibilities when it comes to the eradication of pit toilets. However, it is not necessarily complying with them. We know, for example, Limpopo has about 500 schools that are still using this unhygienic, unsafe pit latrine systems.
Okay. We've seen the deliberations and presentations in court, cut and thrust, and the heat keeps cranking. Talk to us about it.
Well, basically, Section 27's attorney, Chris Makuniki, argued in court a few weeks back that it is constitutionally irresponsible for the Department of Basic Education, as well as the Department of Education here in Limpopo, to introduce such time frames, and thus this needs to be revised. It also said that the department was unclear on the usage of budget in terms of achieving its constitutional responsibility of completely eradicating pit toilets at the schools, also saying and making allegations in their arguments that the department has squandered about 320 million rand that was meant for infrastructure at schools. Now, the Department of Education argued that there are several projects underway, and of course, sanitation at schools is one of those important projects. However, we still have the number of schools that are using pit toilets, and SGBs and communities are always worried and frantic about the safety of learners, particularly in primary schools.
Okay, now one of the instructions in the court order in 2018 was that the Komape family be given 1.4 million in constitutional damage. Was that hard cash? Is it raining chocolates and snowing jelly tot at the Komape family?
I doubt that it was raining, any form of luxury for the Komape family following the tragic loss of the great pupil in that pit toilet. I mean, witnesses described to us that, he was taken out of that pit structure covered in nothing but fecal matter and those excretes, and it was not a nice scene. I think right now what the Komapes are basically trying to do, I was having a chat with James Komape the other day, who indicated that they are working with other schools to make sure that pit toilets are completely eradicated.
Kitty, so much. Thank you so much again. Yeah, thank you so much, Simbo. That's what has been happening in court, and as we said, it's expected to be a protracted legal wrangle, and we're keeping tabs on that.
Lutendo, lovely chatting to you. Thanks to you two gentlemen for joining us. That was Lutendo Bododi, who's focusing on the pit latrine saga in Limpopo, as well as our reporter Katlego Nyoni, who actually broke the story back in 2014 over the death of Michael Komape, who drowned in a pit toilet. And we continue to focus on the pit toilet in South Africa. We've been crisscrossing the country, just getting a sense and the sentiments of the different provinces of how they are dealing with the pit toilets. Now, on to other